Hello everyone, and happy 4th of July to all those who celebrate it. I have no idea where you might be viewing from, America or somewhere else. But this is a new update I'm making on progress. And one thing you might notice first is that you can now start out with an item, including items that are already equipped, like this sword. I need to do that partly for NPCs, and yeah, this one over here, this sword is kind of fake. It's just attached, it's not really a real item. But over here we have a new NPC who is a hostile bandit. And the big news is NPCs now have the ability to have AI attached, and he killed me, but I killed him too. Yeah, I still don't have death for the player character, but non-player characters can die. But that's the big thing I've added, is there is now some actual AI for NPCs. Her AI, by the way, is just a placeholder. It doesn't actually allow them to move or do anything, so she's still just kind of standing here. Now, the first thing I needed to do for that was to get them to chase, or generally to move around. And at first I just attached a nav mesh agent to the character, which is what I did previously with Caverns of Evil. But there are some real limitations to that as far as making them do what you want them to do. Another option that would be good if it existed, or could have been done using certain assets, like a Star Pathfinding project, which I decided to not use. I'm sticking to using as few third-party assets as I can, especially with the code base. But that would be to find out where the agent is headed toward at the moment. Well, you can get a list of waypoints they're going to go through on their route, but you can't get anything that says where they are. So what he does instead, what they all do, is instead of having a nav mesh agent attached to the character, each character has a seeker game object, which is invisible, which has the nav mesh agent, and they follow it. It will stop moving if they're more than one world unit, that is more than 1 meter away, and they will only move if it's at this point 10 centimeters away. At 0.1 world units, I might change that to 1 centimeter. That way it's never far enough away that they should get stuck behind a corner, because it went around a corner. And the reason it needs some distance before they start following it is because otherwise what would happen is they get really glitchy, because there'd be rounding errors, because the distance would be so small. There'd be rounding errors in calculating the angle they should face, because they also always face toward the direction they're moving, that is toward their nav mesh seeker object that I added that holds the agent. The second thing I need to do was add some decision making, which I've just started on. Right now the system I'm using, it all is wrapped inside a finite state machine that holds several states, and I think this would be a good time I may go ahead and show the states. And each of these states is a scriptable object. However, and that is also something I did for Caverns of Evil, but there's an important difference here. The scriptable object, which holds the states, is not used in its original form. Instead, I call instantiate on it to create a duplicate, and that way I can contain other data specific to the AI state. Sorry for my phone. Yeah, and also sorry for this overly sensitive microphone that picks up every bit of background noise. It's all I really could afford. But anyway, the way it works is that the script is that it uses instantiate to clone the scriptable objects for each NPC, each character, each enemy, whatever. I just call them all NPCs, even if they're enemy NPCs. So that way they can also hold data, and that data does not have to be stored in custom classes. If I want to create a special enemy that, say, teleports around or does some other unusual thing that has a special cooldown or whatever, I don't have to attach that data into a special script for that specific creature. I can just put that in the AI script, which I couldn't do before. Figuring this out didn't involve was actually partly because of another problem I was having earlier, which is that my animations I'm using from Animancer also were in scriptable objects, and some things were glitching out. Certain enemies would, like one enemy would constantly run, another one would not run, and it turned out the problem is that they were all sharing the same animation data for their movement state. So I fixed that by instantiating copies instead of using the original that I put in the inspector. And that fixed that. And then I realized I could do that for their animations. Or not only for their animations, but rather also I could do that for their AI. Which I was considering just using a more traditional sort of pre-engine kind of approach where you have normal C# scripts for them, but this is more convenient and I can get sort of the best of both worlds by doing things that way. This is an area that at one point had me really kind of frustrated, the whole AI thing, because I did start out trying to over-engineer it and putting the horse before the cart and trying to make it overly abstract. But then I said, okay, I'm just going to make something that works. And part of the beauty of this system is the way these AI states are set up. You could put anything in them. So you could have a very simple sort of retro style or finite state machine where each one just contains the behavior. But I actually plan ultimately for certain states to have them contain their own utility AI. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically an AI system that looks at all the possible actions they can do and does some math to figure out how good each of those actions is, and then usually either picks the top one, or what I'm going to do, picks randomly from the top few. Alternately, for something in between in complexity, I already have it set up with the possibility of substates, so you could have state machines and state machines. Each one of the states could be its own state machine. I still do not have player death. And I do need to add actually death from fall damage, because nothing really would die from fall damage that's not connected. It doesn't call a check for death. The other thing that I'm really a little bit concerned about right now is this guy. He kills you a bit too quickly, a bit too easily, in my opinion. And this is basically just a kind of average dude. I think I may need slower animations, and maybe a little bit of a longer delay between attacks from enemies. But these animations do have a problem. They go so fast you almost can't see them when your character does them, and it's really hard to get away from them. That should get better once I add blocking and parrying, which maybe I'll have another video to describe my planned parry mechanic. It's not the one most people are used to. It's one I made a kind of came up with an idea for it before I'd ever even played a game with the parry mechanic. But that should make things a little bit better, but still, these attacks go a little too fast. I need to slow them down or come up with slower replacements. And I also kind of need to change something with the swimming system, because right now, if you're wading in water and crouch down to put your eyes below, it triggers swimming. That's because the visual effects and swimming mode are both triggered based on how the water is relative to your eyes. That's not really a good system, because you need them triggered separately based on separate points, so the one that triggers swimming does not move when you crouch, and that way you don't trigger swim mode when crouching and they get stuck in it. Anyway, that's what I've been working on. I've got the beginnings of AI for NPCs set up, and I guess that's all for now. Have a great day, and again, if you're in America, happy 4th of July.